There should be, I guess we're out of seats, but yeah. There's space in the back and also on the sides if you want to sit somewhere. Welcome everyone. My name is Mirna Arsanios. I am the program director of the Poetry Project, and I'm thrilled to welcome tonight Sol Cabrini and Juliana Spahr. Welcome to both of you. I think this is the first time they read together. And Juliana just got to New York and hasn't read here in a while, so we're super excited. And I think this is Sol's first time reading the Poetry Project, so welcome. Before we begin, a few announcements. Coming up this week, we have a lot of things going on at the Poetry Project. On Friday, we're screening Outrider by Alistair Julian, followed by a conversation between Alistair and Anne Waldman. On Monday, we have a reading by Alexis Almeida and Lara Mimosa Montes. And on a Wednesday, PalFest and the Poetry Project are organizing an event together called Networks of Value that invites young authors and publishers to discuss the way that the publishing industry is complicit with genocide and just sort of a breakdown of the stakes and the kind of actors of the industry. So it's going to be an informative conversation, so please join us for that, if you're free. What else? I think that's it for events. There are books for sale, the table over there. Please grab a copy. They're both incredible. I truly recommend them. Yeah, on a more technical note, there's 2 all-gender bathrooms, 1 on the first floor, and also accessible bathroom at the back of the sanctuary. If you need to get there, please let me or anyone else on staff know, and we'll help you get there. I think that's it for announcements. We'll begin. Sol will read first, followed by Juliana. And we have a guest introducer tonight, is a beloved curator in residence, Ethan Philbrick. Yes. We'll introduce Sol, and yeah, so see you in a bit. Thank you, Ethan.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Miran, for welcoming us tonight and for inviting me to do this. It's an honor. Okay. Sol Cabrini, Sol, Sol, Sol. Part of how I know Sol is as someone who is younger than me. Sol is, on the linear timeline, still quite young, and yet Sol's, what to call it, spirit, energy, soul, seems to call forth a different conception of time. Something more cyclical, fractal, all at once, in which Sol's youthfulness is marked by the presence of an oldness, clear-eyed wonderment mixed with clear-eyed wisdom. Sol and I first met through a graduate program, me on my way out, Sol on her way in, a chance encounter while both seeking some sort of refuge within a compromised and compromising institution. Meeting Sol, a gift within the general horror of New York University. I am so grateful to keep knowing her, reading her, listening to her, learning from and alongside her. Sol works across various modes and mediums. She writes scholarship about music while also writing in music. She is a thinker of Black social life, creolization, and transpoetics while also composing poems that articulate and disarticulate each of these axes. Sol is busy. She recently completed a dissertation that pays close attention to Beyonce, if only Beyonce knew how lucky she was to have Sol's critical eyes directed at her oeuvre, in order to theorize the ever-tightening forces of movement capture and art colonialism that undergird the racial capitalist culture industry, while also keeping an ear attuned to the fugitive forms and sensations that slip out from and exceed these regimes of capture and extraction. Sol has multiple manuscripts in the works, both essayistic and poetic, that circle around key terms such as unbeing and non-subject, demonstrating a creative attention to the generativity of life lived under negation. I have gasped aloud on multiple occasions while reading poems by Sol. Often these gasps occur at moments when Sol suddenly renders structure and history within a singular syntactical crack, the big suddenly emerging in the small. Soul recently published a gorgeous poem in the Poetry Project newsletter entitled, "How Can This Be World?" And this title, which becomes a refrain within the poem, flagging a disbelief, how can this be world? How can this be world? And yet the of the disbelief in this repetition turns and burrows in on itself to reveal a different kind of belief on its underside, an immanent belief, perhaps something like comrade belief inside the compounding negations of the world as is. Anyways, I didn't find a way to end this, so please join me in my state of incompletion and give a warm round of applause to welcome to the podium Sol Cabrini.
I'm almost getting dizzy. So, what I'm gonna share is a selection of material, some stuff that I haven't gotten a chance to quite get the hold of. I began writing some of these works at college encampments, protests, school walkouts, fundraisers organized by comrades, friends, peers. For each gathering, for every fundraiser or protest, I tried to write a new poem. Writing became my way of engaging the limits of my talents with the reality of our moment. I repurposed notes from class. I audited fragments from my dissertation and stray phrases overheard in struggle, mapping them into poetic questions I would then stage. History doesn't begin, it presses. Emmanuel Levinas says that behind the crushing weight of capitalism lies the crushing weight of being. Let's live under both. Inside the atmosphere where thought labors to breathe and yet is shared, pressure becomes rhythm, noise that vibrates, distorts, an audition of relation before clarity. Lauren Berlant called this the affect sphere, collective suspension, feeling in circulation without a single object, a long exhale that never becomes a narrative event. Let's begin there, no progress promised, where Levinas' weight touches a Black affect sphere. How can this be world? To the formless formation of rubble, the timeless, timely ash leaning its weight against oxygen's goodbye. Call it architecture's divorce, the chapel split from its prayers, each breathless psalm a dialect, the tongue of collapse never rests. How can this be world? To the language of heart failure, where arteries conjugate verbs like rupture, clog, pulses a stutter in the sentence of the flesh, diastole delays its comma, while systole forgets where to place the period. How can this be world? To the cardiac love that loses one after another, each disappearance a syllable torn from the book of ears. Touch flickers a bad bulb. You call it mourning, it calls you nothing. What alphabet can outlast erosion? How can this be world? To the sky and its cell phones that never dial some of those below the sun back into waking. What did the sky miss while it scrolled? Do clouds archive or delete propaganda? Sunrise burns, but it never backspaces. How can this be world? To the canvas of an annual annihilation, where the seasons paint in subtraction. The fall subtracts color, winter subtracts motion, spring a cruel revision of what has already fled us. Summer, the light at warmth, has already returned. How can this be world? To the death required for a world power to be a world power, where crowns are suited in coffins first, the blueprint for empires cross-eyed in the wounds of those who never signed up for the draft, a pouring rainfall, call it blood currency, and watch who spends it. How can this be world? On earth that is spinning and spilling all of you, to the demolition of memory on the premise of no longer many. Names split into fractions, fractile names rebranded as static. What was once them, now nobody at all. Archive unarchived. The ledger is never zeroed, just decimalized. How can this be world? To all that life that is so vivid it forecasts its own slaughter, foresight, and obscenity, the clairvoyance of seeing your name already inscribed on the teeth of tomorrow, a perpetual immemorial immersion, the rhythm of the body's repetitions, brutal and reprised, a laugh that breaks itself into excursion, a chuckle echoing through the spine's corridors, like a loose bottle rolling beneath a ship's deck. How can this be world? To the pile of laughter that can no longer digest the passage of air it once fed to the hearts of its leftovers. Ribs are tired of being string instruments. Laughter is an aftertaste, micro intervals to the grit of something caught between the teeth that plays the harmony of life out of its tombs. How can this be world? To the familiar depth of peculiar intimate breath, spurting out more language which denies mouth to speak to the ear, year after year, until breath is not a greeting but an exhale of refusal. Air, too, can be made into protest. Listen close. The lungs hold more revolutions than the lungs should. How can this be world? To the proclamation of an internationalization, so perverse in its course of money, capital migrates like swans, seasonal movements predictable but never clipped wings. The border always opens for currency but never for you. How can this be world? To the racialism of acceptance is deception, the corpse that must stand in one's place, alienated in its mist, the solidified reminder that one exists or did persist. The substitution is so subtle, the replacement so quiet, the reverb still believes they belong to the verbs of you. How can this be world? This world, a factory for unmaking, a furnace that filters where you burn just enough to glow but never flame. This world, a name whispered into a crayon where the only answer is your own distorted voice colored back as evidence that you were once empty to yourself. This must be world. How can this be? That piece was written while I was in Chicago, and I got to hear my guardian, Ricardo Gamboa, in conversation with the poet Musab Abu Toa. And I was listening to their conversation, and I was like thinking about this book called History of Madness by Foucault, and there's an introduction where he talks nothing but about the lungs. Interworld. Metal torsos hum through acid light. Chrome and impulse patched. World is not noun, but winding world. Buffering a hiccup from the cyber trust of policies, blazing glaze. A wet, hazy cipher. The scene, statics, artificial and banal. QR codes clatter, downstorm drains. Holograms twitch from glass bone towers to the slick cheek of a teenage lens. Surveillance is the sixth sense. Hordes. Jitterbug into the latest VR casinos of their minds. This is not a Tesla coming of age story. A fighter jet dreams online commissaries. They get social. Pop songs pop the shoppers to keep posting. Celebrity wingspan, aerial grief in the breath. Policy remediates flesh and studies it in the LED fake neon murk low-lit world of poetry. Dolls dance, downbeat but divine incarceration. Bodies like moans made of MIDI. Synthetic torsos, soft-coded 808s. Twirls of T-girls, body modding, their whole life's club. World enters here as pronoun or era and stares back into this cosmos of currency and code. High, low, on earth it rains. Droplets are developed and cyberpunk poetry redesired, and yet it never stops, it never starts. The air is designed with too much. Unontology. Ontology scrambles like ants across concrete just before it rains. Its engines smoke and cling to bodies that enter its scene, leaving the stench of dense gas behind. Its hardness misleads. What seems solid splatters the moment measurement becomes grammar. Ontology composes its measures in relation to ghosts and the dead, whose nature it does not actually understand. A non-dualistic ontology moves without singularizing those relations between categories. It is dynamic, unconstrained by binaries, a rhythm unfolding the reductive singularity often attached to an object. This rhythm exposes a composition that is already multiple, a field of potential emerging. It does not essentialize difference, but moves between variations and uncharted ways of being. It's as if two drummers were playing with the past and future drummers all at once, their rhythms meeting in the indivisible presence of touch, ants scattering, gas thickening, rain about to break open with the horizon. AM sovereign systems. You speak in undone capacity. Your eyes flicker in Brooklyn, half opt-in, half go Queens. Your griefs have better posture than mine. I don't want flowers. I want a world system that doesn't return the signal in the morning, a weather pattern sovereign in its briefness, a disobedient structure, a closeness that doesn't need to always remember. We sit across from each other, a restaurant that cooks up third chances, and you ask, is this a date or a book? And my T for T answer is not language. I don't stop you. There are enough seasons in me I'm trying to keep unsaid, but the fall is only real when the plane believes in the ground, not the crash. So we roll in dirt, looking up at the night sky in Prospect Park, both of our glasses off, and the day refused to open, but we did. Not like metaphor, we opened like the mouth of a world never meant for us. Autonomous entities with subtle bodies. Love is for the birds, and the birds are beautiful. In their flight, no chains of dominion, witness to the land seized yet hallowed, the sky their parchment, and freedom they pen, verses against conquest, time and again, and every wing beat against the march of boots, in the rubble of moments, a lesson in each feather, soft and fleet, yet beneath each beat, a remembrance of clipped wings, traces of blood, untold sings. The beauty of struggle and silence and name, of spaces between each fractured feather. A cadence of defiance through the clipped, the tethered, the bounded fight. A song, a surge, and the boundless air of the night. Tongue in the ruins. As long as there are Black people who migrate, there is no northern limit to the Caribbean. Tongue equals refusal equals aperture. This is based off of a image, a drawing from my younger brother called Yacht Ha-Ha. It's not as funny as the ha-ha, I wish it was. When did the slave ship become a yacht? When did leisure repaint the whole of capture? On deck they laugh, yacht, ha-ha, a sitcom sky above a lake house set, a TV in the clouds barking, place a bet. Below, a chain makes a sentence of the water. A mouth opens where sound cannot live, and still it says, evil spirit, vole sa, feli vole, take it, make it, fly, violate it. The command the market loves, the boat obeys, each bubble rises like a stolen vow, peri parola, lost the word, lost the world. The tongue tries to surface and becomes aperture. Tongue, refusal, leak. Grab the flag, no. The tongue, no. The silence that wraps it. What is seized here is not only a body, but breath. Bodies bent into vessels, language locked in a box. I'm gonna read the piece that what I just did introduces. I don't want to go through all of it. Endless thanks to Jonathan Radbois-Meyers, who took the time to be in conversation with me. This poem is written in English and Kurivini, Louisiana's endangered Creole language. And I'm gonna do my best because I've never read this one before, and it's one of my favorites. Inter. And Louisiana Creole is pronounced differently from French, okay? So I just need to make that clear. Noir, black, but it is not black, no? Voler ça, fais-le voler ça, take it, take flight, violate it, but it is taken, no? Oiseau or voler, bird or poultry, displaced, dispatched from a mouth that won't close, disclose, dislocated, echo location, periparola, lost the word, lost world, lost the mouth that could have fed it, moon, people, world, ape drapola, ape longla, ape silencela, grab the flag, no, the tongue, no, the silence that wraps it, pedili, loose it, let it come undone, l'esprit, move it déjà bon, go ghost, go gloss, go loss. If word is lost, can it still be spoken? Spirit, logos, rema, torde zot langage, torde, throttle the gloss, twist the voice until it forgets how to say itself. Paquite sa mare, let it not note, not quote, not become legible enough to be mistaken for truth. Sois low. How low does the flesh plush? How deep does the world carve itself into body? How does one stomach history, the blade's cliff of an appetite? Mangrove la avec Louisiane, ape torde, mangrove ape torde, moving mangroves of Louisiana, swaying like tongues that never made it to the gumbo, bodies bent into vessels, language in locked box, de fleshy, not quite of flesh, not quite body, not quite free, image or imaginer, a world de-worlds, wording itself into absence, self-deletion as aesthetic critique. Effacer moi-même, effacer qui pas jamais, dans des faits encore, qui pas encore, qui va jamais finir, in self-erasure, effacement, in erasure that does not, in effacement that never, in undoing a body that is not a bot, that never ends, body, dedi mem, unsaying itself, each syllable an opening trying to close, trying to metamorphosis, corlap, ap toujours, produit, les mêmes, encore. The body always in reproduction, always in the encore of rupture, never still enough to be subject, but never moving enough to be free, always in too much excess to be human, never enough to be myth. Dans chansonnier, in songs d'encloyer, in fields dans carré la terre, côté la racine pas chimbo, in a plot of land where roots do not hold implantation, in the field of implantations, field of extractions, field of citation. Ape écrit encore micmac là, caro ape disparaître, caro ape diviser. The plot keeps shifting, the plot keeps disappearing, plot of land divides, was never ours to begin with. Défait jeune, défait naissance, défait nom là, ungender, unbirth, undo the name, forced upon it, noir. For the colonial wound, for the ghost of a mother never recognized, for the impossible, not quite woman, not quite word, not quite whole, flesh. What does the body become when it is written before it is lived? Éclater, shatter, à séparer, at scattered, at split, at undone, misplaced in a language that never meant to hold it. Comme un mode qui galopait, as a function, as a functionary, as a tool, as a grammar of extraction, dit modernité, say modernity. That which turns bodies into text, readable, ownable, transferable, travaila, the laboring, labored flesh, the body in transit in transaction, the wounding world in translated into second-hand knowledge, into meaning, into currency, uterus, plipopile, wombing, wombed into, womb made obsolete. Donné pour ne torpique, torchier, giving torches to the pornotropics, landscapes of trope and spectacle, where the body is an instrument but never its own orchestra. La racine salade on blackness, those roots, blackness in brackets, blackness in transit, blackness as remainder, coucher trop beaucoup, laying down in excess, fuck in excess, flatten in excess, slept in excess, spilling, unreadable, misplaced in the endnotes of history. Jete au l'histoire pas ka, chimbo no. Tossed where history won't or can't hold us. Yekwaye te propriété, mais yete trompé ye même. They misunderstand, they misread. They mistaken for property. Étirier dans entirier. Studied into death, studied into meaning, studied into dust, languages slipping in the mouth of the wrong century, tombé, fallen, erased in someone else's archive. I wanted to say arcade. That's Benjamin haunting me. Café blanche, whitening all as a condition, a demand as the price of recognition. Café blanchito, whitening all that colors, all that breaks the sentence, all that refuses to be placed in order. Saki coloré, that which colors, that which refuses to fit within the given syntax. Désigné, sketches, drafts, unfinished design, ghost of what could have been spoken. Chichimacha, tunica biloxi, calzada genaband of Choctaw, translated too late for America. Pois créole di la foi, a Creole baggage of faith, a burial, a birthright that cannot breathe. Un pois créole, pois avec la mer, pois qui a séparé nous en deux, a Creole weight, a weight of the sea, a weight splitting us in two. Foi déchuqué, faith, uprooted, unfastened, unstitched, unseamed, unable to hold what it once meant. Produit encore, jouer encore, placer encore, produce again, play again, place again, reproduction, replay, replace, staged again, sold again, rebranded, repeated, reduced to an economy of recognition, a place where a word should be, a space where life once stood, un micmac coupé à chaque vision, a cut-up plot at every redo, the story hacked with every retelling, retold, rewritten, resold. That poem is in conversation and with a famous photo called The Scourged Back that I tend to write about and research. And The Scourged Back depicts a man named Peter who, according to the interview, could not actually fully speak in English, but he became an abolitionist image of his lacerated back at the hands of his slave master. This picture and interview was something that was distributed as a postcards. So it's kind of like an engagement with trying to hear him. The administration in the US, the Trump administration recently called the image a part of a series of like a corrosive ideology and is threatening to remove it from museums. From my mother, the gut unsings words converted backward, an arrangement swallowed by breath, misplaced punctuation stutters, dust commas the air, the expression of air halts meaning, evaporates mid-breath, lingering like the scent of old smoke. Seductive sounds are clouds, unwinged heart beatings on through beside, beneath a sky lynched by echoes. I was trying to catch a vibe last night, a rhythm that unraveled itself at the edge of a close ghost host, a phantom wisdom flickering its spasms into embers. The subject acts in smoke, lit or flown, a flame afloat, an apparition or signal blurred by rising heat. I'm a fragment arising out of that sentence, of my father and aunties who had been to prison, change of direction through bars, life parsed into broken clauses, collective silences. The power of speech is parole, each iteration caging its own grammar. Deep creases of a cloud blending sky into paint, a palette of ash, blue notes, cigarettes, gin and juice. The open eye phonography contrasting a queer witness to light, breaking against the trans curvature of words. I was trying to call your number properly, the digits scattered by static, a longing without firm prepositions, a philosophy of missteps. I can't capable, too culpable to the gutted insides of buildings, with their bricks humming hymns of dirges backward into phrases, on backs that black like grandpa, on tracks that train like great-grandpa, iron bending to memory, rails choreographing the weight of inheritance. I come from a family of constructions, work in Detroit hustling rebuttals of Tennessee, Virginian, Barbadian clouds, their steel spines refusing the collapse of the Atlantic Ocean, with the air of the Indies, blood after blood, a lineage of birds carried by tides, Carrington after Carrington, to Brathwaite, each wave slaving, erasing, and rewriting the shoreline of who we are or were. A eulogy for world context. We gathered here today not to bury context, but to confess we never knew her wholly. We mouth her name in tongues already unfaithful. In the archive, she was misfiled under "you had to be there." At the time of disappearance, she was last seen buffering between two hyperlinks. One promised live stream clarity, the other auto-translated shame. Her real pronouns were if, and, but, once, conjunctions that added memory to breath. Her lover meaning has been ghosting since 2020, seen haunting closed captions and public apologies issued in corporate fonts behind paywalls. Many did not attend the funeral. Many did not believe in her death. Some sent cards that read, "Context was never real to begin with." Context is survived by innuendo, tone, a poorly captured screenshot of a screenshot, and an endless captcha of honor, still asking for that old body of text back. Existential drama. Responsibility to the other mirrors this logic. The more we give, the more is demanded. Laughter is an aftertaste. Outside, the street lamp buzzes against the backdrop of the moon. A thin splash of fire against her curtains enters the building. I was sad, but also, there were good moments. She says, "You were talking in your sleep." I say, "Just the wind slipping through the window." She says something about the night becoming day. I nod, watching myself outside the sentence of time. I pull my pockets tighter against nothing. We sit across from each other, faces curling around lines, naming our exes, locking eyes for too long, not moving, powder lifting like the loss of breath. Come to me, hold me before I forget how. Kiss me once, before I dissolve. She asks, "What do you mean by dissolve?" "Nothing much," I say, "just checking in." She replies, "I feel all right, mostly wondering about you." "Why is that?" "Because I upset you last night." This was just one part of the night, I tell her. I was sad, but also, there were good moments. Okay, I have a couple left, and that'll be it. I want to read some of this. Nightlife, 1946, Archibald Motley, by Archibald Motley. The room sways under the weight of rhythm and reverie. Dancing bodies blur into the stumping of feet. The air thickens with sweat and nicotine. Spirits mingle with spirits, cocktails in mid-creation as the bartenders perform their alchemy. Suddenly, the scene sharpens. Form and shape rise from the haze. They become figures from a literal canvas. At the center of it all, a man tips his head back, drowning the last glint of wine in his glass. Beside him, a woman exhales smoke, her side curling into the dim light like a lazy ghost. Gestures ripple across the space, bodies in perpetual motion, painting a sensorial symphony. Colors bloom and burst, a kaleidoscope of lightness erupting against the shadowy undertow. A waiter leans forward, precarious, as if he might tumble into the dance itself. He balances a tray, a salvar, the drink trembling, but intact amidst the chaos. The word salvar, rooted in Latin, means to preserve from risk, and that's precisely what he does, his upper torso pitched like a ship against the waves of bodies surging around him. I'm not going to finish that one, but It's a painting by Archibald Motley called Nightlife. America is not real. Live stream footprints soak children's blood. Class broods the blood, pressing on tomorrow like a thumbprint over a broken screen of followers. They call it a garden of accessibility, but it was always guarded surveillance. What is the future for the American administration? A future will straighten in sleep, still, trees growing backwards, roots diving towards sky, like code looking for its own author. Clouds made of neuro ash, cities made of smart dust, birds cough in songs, windows bend, project, and splatter, all through pitch correction, as sun disarms every pretense of permanence, being toward crash. Eye sockets do not translate data cleanly. Subways will hum like intestines digesting us wholesome. Skyscrapers will sink into old passwords as our AI angels of history hover, not forward, but buffering, and still the world refreshes, a tab of acid left open, flags auto-made from vacant promises of self-serving prescription refills of the Big Bang, where the grass has forgotten how to feel green. American Night, Aaron Bushnell. In the halls where liberty's architects conspired, the U.S. summons the poet's voice, a composition cast to contrive concord from discord, to implant the flesh of memoir with art's ointment, beneath the austere gaze of Franklin's green dollar vigils. Records becoming the poet's currency, governing star in the American night. It's the architecture of amnesia, a relentless tempo of documenting, recoiling or rearming the cavity that insists on its own invisibility. In this stately assembly, I tremble as only a self could, fracture as only despair might. Immanence in tradition, a genocidal riddle unflinching in the cipher of U.S. existence, deciphering life from the indication of movement, refusal, and resonance. In this Western poem where authority masks despotism, funding drones to hit Lebanon and Gaza, poetry grapples with its shadow, a self-portrait, graphic and colossal, dreams, sounds, dooms, and heirlooms of slavery's chains. The art of violence has never been art, but the violence of art has always been art, where the act of citizenship arrives with obliteration. For the myth of the valiant and the bold, this republic does not gamble with its own Zionist hands. It has never been native to that which it claims. Its mantra, a U.S. remote control command. Vote, vote. This time you will be recognized as human, I promise. You have my word. This time, this freedom will be yours and yours, better than all yesterday's foregone. Okay, I for real only have two. This is the morsel of a people. No longer, birds abandoned just by fighter jets. Spectators stab at the people with silence. Art incites a stampede of false miracles. How did you spend an entire day waiting to speak to no one? Jet. A calendar of infringements, while the dead pope's hands grope and pray at the carcass of the heavens. A stealth fighter marks its body target, on earth as it is in severance. Nothing adds up to being fed. Unbeing, keloid scripts of battered time. Look again, again, again. Here is a lacerated back again, a silent communique. Drums haunting the dark sky's hush. What was wrecked returns, reopened in scraps. A body-made page, a crusty echo of the non-scream, refusing to be pinned down into lyrical verbiage. And looking, we risk participating in the violence. And refusing to look, we risk erasure. The image demands we inhabit that tension without escape. I'm skipping to the last poem. Here we go. What is the nature of your work? after a conversation with a friend. It's bizarre to me that I had this conversation. It's like, honestly, why would he even take the time or words and breath? So, hand in hand, we tried to stop the waterfall. Not a metaphor, a waterfall of blood where Gaza opens but is not open to. They do all kinds of torture to her. A mother without skin, a child dancing yesterday still beneath the rubble of that dance. Gaza is a transit point for humanitarian disaster. My friend, he says, they are not allowed to live without dying again. They do all kinds of torture to her. There is no relief that does not implicate us. No tulips assume exhales without blood in a bulb. No air circulates without a checkpoint. Even our eyelids soften with borders, the grain of grass, the motor's hum, the moon's denial. Each sunbeam a demonstration of complicity. And the only poem I thought I had for Gaza, under the same moon and sun, was my failure to comprehend. I say there is no poetry under genocide unless that poetry ends genocide. And how poetic could real justice ever be? A breadline of liberation, a weapon of a sonnet made of return, a complete merciful crushing of all those who pour their hands into this waterfall, that would be poetry. They do all kinds of torture to her. I swear to God, my friend says, they are not sleeping because of hunger. Children were dancing and now there are no houses. No houses. No doors to knock. No sky to trust. How ugly this occupier is, and yet I tired you out with me. My friend, he says this not in resentment, but because even saying it hurts. I tired you out with me and tells me, good night. I lied. Can I do one more? Okay. So this is called the Paternal Poem, and it's dedicated to Saint Domingue and Haiti, which is a diaspora within a diaspora that did not live to see the revolution and were instead re-enslaved in Louisiana. And it's, yes. The Paternal Poem, the folding of orphanhood into kinship, a crease not unlike prayer, or the way old bills kneel into my grandma's sock drawers, the renaming and gamble of mangled selves in exile, names change in the legislation of freedoms, who taste wrong and yet undergo sky. Instability was not a personal failure, it is a structural ritual, a backbeat indigo rhythm, popping flesh, built from leaving, mid-revolution, mid-liberation. Documents don't deserve truth, they reserve bureaucracy, the brittle aftergraphing of ink. And often, the truth lies in what my advisor Fred calls the break, whose hesitation creolizes the reader's mouth in the aftersounds of all 7 nights. Because the truth is in how records fall apart, like a Sunday suit washed too many times for Chicago funerals, or a godmother's story with abandonment issues, covering loss that somehow rebirths relation anyway. My great-grandfather, because grief made it true, or murky, haunted, interrupted, and still I'm trying to understand my own unbeing. What tranquilization of noise made me familiar without ever knowing the tranquility of song? When language fails, as it often does, in the airwaves of revolution, in the blue-lipped lull between a nickname, a bullet, and a seagull flying over a Cuban plantation, I turn to documents of New Iberia that still shriek out from Mississippi to the dark continent, under the ship's floorboards of shackled ankles, drumming the musical genres of the Americas oeuvre into existence by foot, sweat, luck, or loss of limb, or fact of breath. Doubleness is at the core of groove and genocide. Where the record ends, a moan begins. Trauma dancing down without words, body screams in lower lines and split surnames and patches and stutters and
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sol. I could have listened to you read for another 30 minutes. It was so wonderful. I also love how both you and Juliana really think about what the poem is and what poetry is, and that's a kind of beautiful overlap, I think, in your poetics. Okay, it is my true honor to introduce Juliana Spahr. Juliana's poems, or perhaps even the poem itself, holds at its core an agonizing contradiction. Quote, "Everything is fucked because all these beautiful things will be gone, which then allows the inventory of the beautiful things that will soon be gone to swell into the heart." End of quote. In other words, nature, its epiphanic beauty, can only be experienced through the loss it represents, by looking retroactively from the future at a present already haunted by extinction. Obviously, capitalism is destroying everything, producing, quote, "a metabolic rift between humans and nature." It's nothing less than cynical that the very forces responsible for such destruction are currently engineering its reversal. While the US regressively doubles down on its attachment to coal, China's march towards carbon neutrality could potentially pause doom for a few planetary seconds. Yet, there's little hope to be found in such a perverse inversion. I don't know if hope is a relevant category to Juliana's poetics, which lean instead towards a low-key melancholy that sharpens rather than obscures revelation. A moment of perceptive disclosure only the poem can capture, like when halfway through a brawl between fascist and Antifa, before dusk, the sky suddenly clears up, the anger and pleasure of such a sight forming feelings so irreconcilable only a poem can contain them. The poem, more than our fucked up relationship to the environment, is a true protagonist of this collection, a meditation on its lyric history via the American transcendentalist tradition as it intersects with the socially engaged poetics of Rukeyser and the decolonial surrealism of Césaire. Juliana finds company in, quote, luminous archives, an ars poetica reflecting on the poem as an existential category of experience. Writing with Brecht's preface to the Svendorg poems, quote, "In the dark times, will there also be singing? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times." The poem in Juliana's book becomes a tenuous wager against its own irrelevance. Alongside temporal markers that squarely situate the poem in historical time, there's also the time of the poem itself. Quote, "What I loved about this thing I knew, occasional poem, was how it might hold the moment, just the moment, nothing more." End of quote. A moment not divorced from history, yet not entirely absorbed by it or captured by a fully formed poetics. Perhaps the loss of lyrical epiphany isn't the only way to experience what poetry has to offer. Similar to its individual pieces, Ars Poeticas too positions itself against itself, an anti-treatise resisting the conventions of the art of poetry. It tells us the poem doesn't owe us anything, and the opposite might also be true. It exists. It exists alongside the Antifa brawl, the Catalina Mariposa lily, the wallowing bison. Like a coral nested in an intertidal zone, the poem too, Juliana insists, is part of life. Please join me in welcoming Juliana Spahr.
That was super. It's really, really lovely. And thank you for having me. It's really exciting to see the poetry project just thriving still after so many years. can I lower this? Maybe. I'm going to read a poem out of this book. I'd been asked to write a poem for a Karente Yamashita collection, and I wrote this I wrote this poem that was about this town called Cheshire, and it's like about 45 minutes from where I'm from, or it was a town that once existed called Cheshire. And there had been like a number of coal-burning electrical companies in the town, I think like 2 maybe, or plants. And the electrical company just bought out the town rather than kind of like deal with the potential lawsuits that were coming, and kind of just tore down all the houses. And I was kind of interested in this idea that if you bought something, you no longer, you could just ruin it. It didn't matter, apparently. But so I wrote this poem, and it was all wrong. And this poem is somewhat about, like, it's a revisioning of that original poem. So warblers and the northeast flowing winds ride together down the river these cool spring nights. Sugar maples, beech, and northern red oaks grow to a largeness helped by ferns and fungi. The bobcat and the woodrat shelter beneath. Nearby, the Virginia creeper and its leaves of 5 adhesive tips. Its carefree ball-like fruits twine around the sawbriars that grow so fast overnight that it is as if by the foot. The familiar bluet hovers over, above, around. As you well know, this place is weighty, tawdry, the soil redolent, the symphony terrestrial. The sun's late-day glimmer pleases so much it might as well be fireworks. A choreography of eddies and currents fed by tributaries, the Muskingum, the Miami, the Wabash and the Scioto from the south, the Tennessee, the Big Sandy, and the Licking from the north, that babble happily. You add a siren off in the distance, pause dramatically to list the names of everyone you once kissed beneath its bridges and the darkness that harmonizes with fecundity. And then you, never one to hold back, insist on putting one more bird on it, if only because you want to dwell with the words golden-winged, chestnut-sided, and yellow-rumped. That feeling of possibility that you can hold both of the river's climates, the subtropical one and the continental one, in a few lines. That conviction that all it takes is to find a few words in the dictionary, inventory a dangerous lexicon of allure, and allow a fleeting encore to come out the other side. That belief that a poem can meaningfully insist that someone take a moment and just bother with beauty, that someone will understand a poem to be an intricate sonnet of interconnected streams, that someone will claim there is a political beauty in a few important-sounding words arranged in rough syllable counts. By someone, you mean a clown, curly red hair, exaggerated red and white lips, something funny going on with the eyebrows, the sort that suddenly shows up in this locale, celebrating the intrinsic beauty of the space with yet another poem about lost opportunity and bad timing in relationships. By clown, you mean yourself just moments ago. All of that gone. You can't say it that way anymore. No one can. A dog is barking as you turn your head to see the coal barge floating down the river's curves, heading to the power plant off in the near distance, ominous beneath the blue plume of smoke produced by its smokestacks. Horace makes fun of those who write of babbling brooks, and he did not even know about coal barges and capitalism, much less the late capitalism that blossomed while you sat around thinking about the cuteness of a bobcat and a woodrat, 2 enemies, sheltering under a very large sugar maple and an image of an impossible Pax Americana. If only for the sake of self-analysis, you think something ought to be written about the cooling towers, the 765 kilovolt transmission lines, the smokestacks, the blue plume that regularly dusts the tubal inflorescences of the bee balm, the stubby blue flowers of the wild indigo, the polished, vibrant red, deeply 5-lobed racemes of the pinnately cut and lobed wood poppy, and the dark green and the black of the white wood aster. Even that bobcat and that woodrat sheltering beneath get plumed. Years ago, because of the plume, everyone human in town packed up their houses and left, pocketing 3 times the market value for them. Bee balm, blue indigo, wood poppy, whitewood aster, bobcat, woodrat obviously had nothing to sell and so settled in, tolerating. Horace suggests couplets and iambs to tell a tragic tale, this tragic tale of particles of sulfites and nitrates, water, gaseous nitrogen dioxide, sulfur trioxide, full of mercury, of polyfluorinated alkali substances of emissions, coal ash fly, humid bottom ash, boiler slag, scrubber sludge, of fluidized bed combustion ash, residues, milky drops, soot, and white specks, all carried by southern winds. There you go again, counting syllables as your index fingers drum out an elusive beat on your wooden desktop. You never wanted to lose faith in a poem, the many intricate interplays that between love, the natural world, and statements of identity, that elusive calculus of 70, 20, and 10% that defies neat delineation. But it was not like you ever bothered to have faith in it, even as you rhymed sulfates and nitrates. After the barge passes by, a picnic on the car's hood ensues. Cheese, crackers, and onion are consumed in a liminal space. You have to do this sometimes, come out into the open. It is some puzzle how you continue standing here, as if to sing while breathing the smoke of the pit, the air saturated, the river's steeped history, as birds peck away at fellow birds. And yet, what else are you doing here, besides hoping to find some sort of instruction manual on how to refrain this song, where elk gaze beside the strong oak tree, hunted down yet persisting, a song akin to night heron ghost and bluebird ghost, stuttering to each other, if only for the desire to communicate. Comforting is a complicated word. And then I was going to read this new thing. Which is in a Google Doc, so I'm hoping I can pull this off. I had written something about this plankton, this specific plankton whose name I can't say, that may be Dapsilidium pastillacea, something, that lives around the warm ocean between Papua New Guinea and Australia. So this is it. All around a warming ocean, a reservoir of heat that spanned from the eastern coast of Africa to the western Pacific. Like languages, economies, various ornate belief systems, the warmth developed in one area, spread outward, crossed borders, reshaped things far from the original source. It accumulated energy and drove atmospheric circulation. It dictated weather across continents, unleashing storms and shifting currents. It was a form of power that, while invisible, defined daily life, driving monsoon rains in one direction, typhoons in another, unleashing floods in one moment and droughts in the next, a thermal engine that ran without stopping. Then beneath the surface and droughts in the next, then beneath the surface, within the warmth, the calm, all the things. Translucent jellyfish, tentacles trailing like gossamer threads, bells pulsing. Coral structures, some branching like skeletal trees, others massed and brain-like convolutions. Thousands of fish, some brightly colored, some more modest in their attention to camouflage. There was a concentration of life, an underwater metropolis that represented not merely an endless number of biological phenomenon, but also over and over again pursued complicated forms of collective labor. Rivers transported calcium from rocks on land into the sea. Tiny coral polyps extracted this calcium using specialized cells that pumped hydrogen ions away from the site where they built their calcium carbonate dwellings. Once dead, their skeletal remains became the foundation for subsequent generations, the dead an encyclopedia that sustained the living. Mnemosyne twisted and turned through the dark water of this refugium. Laboring invisibly to produce the energy that sustained all other forms of life, she transformed sun into sugar. She had 2 slender thread-like hairs that she used as an appendage so as to swim through the warm waters. One wrapped ribbon-like around a groove that spanned the equator of her spindle-like shape, wide in the middle, tapered at both ends. Another trailed behind the spindle with a slow wave-like motion, her hard armored shell crested in an apex. The edges of her doorway between mobility and dormancy, between present and future, was defined with a geometric precision. Her outer wall was smooth and translucent. She had a dextral torsion, a ventral organization. And then there were the series of spine-like projections that radiated out from her spindle, as if she was a queen with a crown of branches. Each branch emerged from a circular base and terminated in a distinctive forked tip. She wore a crown but was not a queen. She was the last survivor of a Cenozoic lineage. She was a halfway creature, both plant and animal. Only she, among the various gods, could interpret the language of pressure and darkness for those who lived in the light. Where once grand figures like Zeus might have dominated narratives with their fury and power, it was Mnemosyne with her silence who now took on that role. She silently documented a single continuous story that she had written over many years. In the story, she refused to name protagonist and antagonist. She herself was neither also. She embodied a different form of resistance, not heroic opposition, but persistent endurance, pursuing smallness to the point of near invisibility while maintaining an insistent presence. Her example was an ethics of attention that refused human exceptionalism. She traced the delicate, almost imperceptible movements through which life persisted. She traveled through water, or she carried a scroll and a stack of books, or a stylus and a tablet, or a globe and a compass, or each chamber was a library of stories about the warming ocean, or she was chiseled out of calcium, or she was sediment, or she had once bedded down with a shepherd who turned out to be Zeus, ocean chemistry stories, carbon cycle stories, acidification stories, the breathing of the planet stories, stories of Earth, heroic, consequential, resonant, stretching back to the planet's fiery birth. Stories of the molecular romance between ocean and atmosphere, the tender transfer of gases across the water skin. Stories of photosynthesis transforming dissolved gas into organic matter. Stories of the ocean's century-long respiration as deep currents completed their circuit of the globe. Stories of desire and consequence, of attraction leading to transformation. Stories of carbon sinking into sediment, moved from circulation for centuries or millennia. Stories of the changing ratio between strontium and calcium that marked each passing millennium. Stories of the flux between reservoirs, atmosphere, surface, ocean, deep ocean, sediment, biosphere, each transfer recorded in isotropic signatures. Stories of not enough dominance, but through adaptation. Stories at the edge where land meets rising water. Stories of the first coal mine, the first oil well. Stories of carbon concentrations accelerating as cities sprawl across continents as oil fields pulse black liquid into tankers. Stories of carbon atoms traveling from tailpipe to atmosphere to ocean to sediment. Stories of the carbon signatures of wars and revolutions, depressions and booms, the breath of industry. Stories of agricultural pattern disruption, changing riverine inputs to coastal zones. Stories of radioactive traces of nuclear tests. Stories of dissolving shells, stories of oxygen depleting in deeper waters as stratification intensifies, stories of microbial communities shifting in response to respiratory conditions, stories of thresholds crossed, of ecological cascades initiating, stories of shipping routes carved through melting Arctic ice, stories of fish populations migrating poleward away from traditional fishing grounds, stories of humans mistaking the pace of their lives for the pace of planetary change. Stories of 5 mass extinctions. Stories of no longer waiting for the mythical intermediary, the technological solution, the political will. Stories of how, in the cone of light beneath the objective lens, was simultaneously an emissary from the past and a message to the future. Mnemosyne neither encourages nor requires us to take up arms. Her stories are an inheritance, a chemical archive that does not prescribe action, that just preserves memory. She wrote it without judgment, without presumed interpretation, without the need for readership. And she will go on writing it as coastal cities continue their rhythms, oblivious to rising waters that carry her and their currents. And yet from her stories, an art yet to be made, one full of heroic metaphors of sabotage and of ceremony, of blockades and of prayer. An art that is pressure on the wound. An art that provides much needed solidarity with those bleeding. An art that is small boats that leave at dawn, their hulls barely marking the surface of these waters, thick with memory, crossing the invisible boundaries of corporate concessions. An art of fires on the water, an art of infrastructures blooming into sudden dawn. an art that will move through mangrove forests carrying tools designed to destroy. It is not that she provides permission for violence with her stories. She is not someone who grants permission. She is not a mortal, not a human. But through her scale of violation, how all waters connect, all struggles flow together. This world that is our piece of art yet to make. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juliana. Thank you, Soul. This was a truly nourishing reading. I also want to thank Ethan for your beautiful introduction, as well as our sound tech, Ayaz, James working videography for the first time tonight, yay. Our staff support, Will, Heather, and as well as all our volunteers. I remember that Juliana in her former bio said that you intern here, I think, in the 90s. Is that true? In the 80s, okay. Not in the 90s, in the 80s, but yeah. So anyways, thank you for this reading, and thank you all for coming.